Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star sports podcast. It's Tuesday, June 13th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. 1 year ago this week, Kansas City learned it was one of 11 U.S. cities to win a FIFA World Cup 2026 bid, and now the event is less than 3 years away. We don't know how many games will be played at Arrowhead Stadium. We also don't know if Kansas City will be used as a base camp for a national team, although we have a pretty good idea that it will. We do know that the Kansas City effort now has a board of directors and an executive director. Katherine Holland, who led the local bid process, is transitioning into overseeing Kansas City's readiness for our slice of the world's biggest sporting event. I caught up with Katherine recently, and we discussed the World Cup and how the city is preparing. There's much to do, from planning transportation to fan festivals and much more. She brings us up to date on the to-do list. It's a huge task, and the clock is ticking. Let's get started with my conversation with Katherine Holland, Executive Director of Kansas City 2026. How is your life going to be different as Executive Director?
As opposed to bid director? Now we have to bring this to life, right? Make it happen and deliver against all of the planning verticals that, are required, from transportation and safety and security and managing volunteer database, obviously planning and activating FIFA Fan Fest, making sure that we have sort of the customer experience in place so that everybody from, again, the teams and the coaching staffs and the fans and the volunteers and just the sort of workforce that is going to be required to bring this to life is well informed and feels good about everything. So it's moving from concept to planning and execution, I think, at the end of the day.
So do all of those things have an equal part on your desk, or is there an order to which you're going to have to tackle some of these issues?
I think that all of them have an equal part. I think the timeline against which core planning happens will be different for each one, right? So stadium modifications, which obviously the Chiefs and Arrowhead events will have a pivotal role in from a project management standpoint. Work has already begun on that. We had to do a lot of due diligence just during the bid process to get FIFA comfortable with the modifications that we need to make to accommodate the pitch. So we're a little bit lucky in that standpoint. Everybody is. Every stadium has to do something to modify their existing footprint, but that work we've been undergoing that effort for a little while. Now we have to get, through a more detailed timeline, obviously accommodating the NFL season and things like that. Transportation, we need to really focus on quickly here, I think. I feel really strongly, and I've said this throughout this process, that if we don't get transportation right from the get-go and make it smooth and easy for people to utilize, we're contractually obligated to deliver a complimentary transit system specific to the World Cup. If we don't get that right, then that could kind of mar people's entire experience. And it's transportation for everybody, from fans attending Fan Fest or the matches out at GEHA Field at Arrowhead, but also transportation for volunteers, right, who need to get to various areas of the city where we'll be activating, spaces. So I think transportation is a big priority for me in these early days. Engaging some external support, probably through some transportation engineering firms who would be able to come together and sort of look at the entire ecosystem, right? The whole universe that we have to deliver against, that will require both, a private and public collaboration to deliver against, and also incorporating Amtrak, right? We've had early conversations with Amtrak about adding stops along some of their main routes throughout the Midwest. Currently, for example, the Missouri River Runner does not stop in Lawrence.
Right.
Lawrence could be a team base camp for possibly, a couple of countries that might want to open up some observation opportunities for their fans to come and engage. So we're talking about adding stop in Lawrence temporarily. And then transportation's big. It will be a big component. There are some markets for which it will be less of a lift because of more robust existing public transit that they can use. I think for ours, it will be a bigger lift, but also has the potential for long-term impact from a legacy standpoint.
Right, and doesn't it kind of say something about Kansas City and where we're located and kind of how spread out we are, that public transportation's never been not much of a front burner issue. I mean, we have the streetcar's nice. It took us, there was a 40-year gap between streetcars in Kansas City, and it only goes for 2 miles now.
Right.
With additional couple coming. It is something that Kansas City has to, rise to the occasion for. So do you have concepts of what it would look like in 3.5 years? And
we do. We have very high-level concepts, again, that were sort of developed during the bid process because we had to demonstrate to FIFA that we were thinking through this. And it's sort of it's a multimodal transit system whereby if, let's say, for example, a fan arrives from Germany, they land at KCI, there will be a dedicated, potentially, again, this is all concept right now, but a dedicated bus system or some system that, some sort of transit option that they could get on at the airport, and that will hopefully run to potentially different areas of our metro where there might be some hotel clusters. I mean, we can't, deliver everybody to the front door of their hotel if they're staying, sort of outside. But again, working with these other agencies like Amtrak, hopefully we might be able to. As a reminder, we had to source 55,000 hotel rooms within a 2.5-hour radius around the metro. But, they arrive at KCI, they can take a bus into, let's say, FanFest. Or if they are going right out to GEHA Field at Arrowhead to attend a match, they can sort of go directly there. Or they can go to a hotel cluster, drop off at a dedicated sort of transit hub that then they will allow them to more easily navigate our metro, whether it's through, again, rideshare or walking, frankly, or streetcar when they get into town. So we presented to FIFA during the bid process a very high-level concept, just to demonstrate to them that we understood the far-reaching sort of needs that we need to deliver against. But we certainly need to refine it and, and source resources, frankly, from around the region to help support that initiative.
Does anything have to be constructed?
No, and FIFA has been very clear about that with all of the host cities. I think one of the reasons that they embarked upon this larger footprint, larger tournament, 3-country, 16-city hosting structure with the United States, Canada, and Mexico is because, unlike past tournaments, there's not really any ground-up infrastructure build required by any host city to deliver this event. Early on, right after the bid was announced, there was some conversation, frankly, locally about the need or the requirement to expand the streetcar east-west out to Arrowhead. We really actually received a call from FIFA saying, hey guys, that was not a part of your bid. It's not a requirement of your bid. And we all need to be very mindful because of FIFA's human rights and sustainability goals of sort of attaching these types of infrastructure requirements to the World Cup directly. Certainly, smart infrastructure development should happen, right? But it should be concepted in order to deliver well beyond the World Cup, right? Like if there's new hotels that pop up, wonderful, but they need to be looking longer term. We don't need any more hotel rooms. We wouldn't have been given host city duties if we didn't have the baseline assets in place to deliver this event.
Right.
So my philosophy, my thought process is we have a contractual obligation to deliver an event to FIFA. That's one lane. We also have an obligation as a city not to squander this opportunity, right? To think about the legacy and the changes that can happen in and around our metro area that should be happening anyway, but maybe might be expedited because we've got this big event coming. But they need to work in tandem together, in parallel. And I think that's what this board is going to be very good about sort of shepherding. We have to deliver this event. There are things that we have to do, but what else can we be thinking about that makes sense from a long-term perspective?
How often is the board going to convene?
I think that's to be determined. I think the cadence will sort of depend on what point in the planning phase we are. Probably minimum monthly, with the executive committee maybe meeting a little bit more frequently. But again, there's certainly going to be some planning verticals that require more frequent engagement with this board. And I think that's just going to be sort of based on, frankly, what's happening at any given point in time as it relates to the larger project.
How about the fan fests? That'll be certainly the most visible thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the games aren't being played. What are the early ideas about that? In fact, I remember talking about the possibility of multiple fan fests.
Yes, that's still possible. I would say that we are in the early phases of thinking about that. We're certainly reflecting on the NFL draft. There was a lot of learnings that came from using that footprint. That was one of the original locations that we proposed in the bid. The sort of second/alternative location was the south lawn of the Nelson Atkins Museum, across Emmanuel Cleaver Boulevard, down through Tice Park, ending at Brush Creek. I actually have a call with FIFA next week to gain a little bit more insight. It's difficult to fully concept FanFest without a schedule, because we have to understand how, what the match schedule looks like, where we're required to have it open and fully programmed, versus, whether we shut it down and encourage people to sort of experience Kansas City in a different way, or we program it with opportunities that are unique and specific to Kansas City. So that's a consideration. The other thing I'm not quite clear on yet is the requirements of space that we're going to need to allocate to FIFA's global sponsors. I don't know if they're going to need a footprint in every single host city, or if they're going to, based on their business goals and strategy, kind of cherry pick markets. So there's still a lot of unknowns. I think the concept of multiple fan fests is still on the table. I think it's going to depend on a market-to-market basis. I think you might see each host city taking on a different strategy.
Okay.
I've heard from a couple that are looking at utilizing multiple locations, others that are focused on one primary location, with the idea that, sort of ancillary activations will naturally happen given the event. And we'll have to look at our budget and kind of the needs of the community. But I would say, aside from operationalizing the entity and then focusing on building out an organization and a strat plan and transportation, FanFest is probably next on my list of top, 3 to 5 things we need to address quickly.
Tell me what the other ones are, so I won't guess.
Those are the only 2 that we proposed formally.
Okay.
So, that's really, those are the 2 that we've focused on. I think we need to think about, and again, reflect on NFL draft. It was an incredibly successful event. Very, very different than what the World Cup is going to be. FanFest conceivably would have to be programmed for a minimum of 37 to 39 days. Minimum, right? Depending on what the tournament timeline is.
Is that all? A 40-day FanFest?
They're looking, yeah. So we know, obviously, the final will be July 19th, but they haven't confirmed the first match.
Right. We don't even know the date. We don't know the date of the first match. Nope. We officially don't know where any of that's going to be, right?
No.
We think New York at the end, maybe Mexico City at the beginning, but maybe. Those are maybes.
Maybe. We're hopeful that we'll know this fall.
Right.
So, but truthfully, we haven't necessarily formally engaged in dialogue around alternative, FanFest locations other than those 2.
And the timing is such that it can't be based on the being a base camp for fans, because FanFest has to be planned, I imagine, before you know what countries might be based here.
I think FanFest will be pretty. It's our city's FanFest, right? Not necessarily tied to what teams end up here. I do think that there will be another strategy and another planning vertical where, once we know what those teams are, how do we work to accommodate them in a different way, right? But that's also a challenge because, as you well know, and maybe this is different with a 48-team structure, but those team base camp locations will change up until really when FIFA requires teams to arrive. The example being, in 2022, Italy had one of the best team base camp locations in Doha. They didn't qualify. So France ended up moving into their original team base camp location, and then someone else moved into France's. So there was a shuffle, a little bit of a shuffle leading into just the start of the tournament.
Right.
Again, I don't know how much that will happen with 48 teams, just because you have more qualifying up front.
Sure.
And the big ones, I was certainly surprised when Italy didn't qualify.
Yes. Yeah.
But our FIFA Fan Fest, Kansas City FIFA Fan Fest, will be sort of agnostic from anything that might happen around team base camps.
And we spent a lot of time talking about, Kansas City being the smallest of the metropolitan areas that are hosting. But what are the advantages that Kansas City has because of its size that maybe we won't see in other cities?
From an activation standpoint, I think you're going to see just more obvious community engagement, right, around this event. I think it's just a very different opportunity for Kansas City because of our size, because of the collaborative nature, because of the regionality. Listen, New York is my home away from home. Love New York. Lived in San Francisco. There is, I think, a little bit of of course we're going to get it here, right? Of course we're going to be a World Cup host city. I think Kansas City it's just different for us. It just means something different. And I just in the year that I've been sort of managing this project from the day that, it's almost a year, it's June 16th. It was June 16th of 2022. I just have been so the bid process and collaborating on the host city visit was unbelievable. It was incredibly inspiring, the way that people came together and rallied around that. I'm really hopeful that and I feel like that's continued, just the excitement and the, what can we do? How can we be engaged? How can we help? And I'm hopeful that it continues through. I also think, we're collaborating really well with the 10
U.S.
U.S. host cities. It was funny because during the bid process, we were very much discouraged from communicating with each other, right? Because we're competing against each other at the end of the day. But now we are coalescing around sort of obviously shared needs for resources from the federal government in the form of, safety and security, right? So we're working very closely to make sure that, certainly when the match schedule comes out, hypothetically, LA and New York probably will have more matches. So they might need more, support depending on how the federal government sort of classifies the security protocols around, all of the elements, Fan Fest, matches, and things like that. But Kansas State very much has a seat at the table and is being treated on the same level as those big cities. So I'm not at all worried about our ability to sort of get our piece of the pie, for lack of a better way of saying it. We've got that at this level, but I just think we're going to shine in a different way with the way that we incorporate our culture, again, our regionality, our local businesses, the pride that Kansas City has. And there's no other host city that loves themselves more than Kansas City and loves to wear, Kansas City. So I just think people always talk about how many international visitors we're going to attract, and that is 100% true. There's not going to be any event that attracts more international visitors. I also think that we are underestimating how many people from the United States are going to travel to Kansas City because they're like, man, what's going on in Kansas City? They're doing pretty well. Hosted the NFL draft. They're a World Cup city. Maybe they Airbnb their house in LA and they come to Kansas City to experience the event because it'll be maybe more accessible. And also an excuse to come visit a market that is, clearly now occupied a space on the global stage that they might not have ever had an excuse to come see before. So I think you're going to see you're going to feel the flavor and the culture of Kansas City in a bigger way than maybe some other host cities.
Well, and it's your job as executive director, you've got to guarantee that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your job.
Well, and I joked with, I think I met with the KC Ad Club this morning, and I joked that one of my favorite aspects of this job is I get pitched weekly from global agencies in New York and, London and LA and San Francisco who all want to They want to put together the marketing plan for Kansas City. They want to help us. And I love being able to say thanks, but no thanks. We've got an incredible amount of creativity and talent here in Kansas City that we will be tapping into to ensure that, that we are well represented and that we are unique and different and not just lumped into, kind of the rest of the host cities. We will engage agencies across our region for sure, but I guarantee that we're going to focus on leveraging our talent here because we have so much, and because there's a vested interest in elevating Kansas City in a different way. Again, no disrespect to our global agencies. They're wonderful, but I don't want you sort of having 4 host cities as a client that you're approaching in the same way. I want a bunch of the best local agencies here to be focused on, Hispanic marketing and, other sort of international marketing, but here, so that our city is the sole focus of their efforts and their jobs.
Have you heard about the little groundswell of support in KCK for Croatia?
Yes.
And maybe making a base camp for them. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. And again, I think we would absolutely want to engage that community in Strawberry Hill and KCK if Croatia does choose. And again, I think FIFA really controls the sort of team base camp selection process. We work with them to create the materials, to provide the information. It's very much kind of a FIFA controlled process. That's not to say that we can't sort of start celebrating, the pockets and the communities that we have in Kansas City in a bigger way to maybe become more top of mind for some of those countries. I think it would be incredible if Croatia chose. And again, that we would deeply engage that community to help us figure out, like, what are they going to want? What is that country and that culture? What do we need to do to ingratiate ourselves with them to make them feel really good when they're here in Kansas City? Like, how can we customize some opportunities for them to explore and experience Kansas City in a different way, aside from them coming to support their team?
I didn't realize the nation. It makes sense, but I didn't realize the nations work through FIFA for that. I would think that they would send their own people to scout.
No, they will. They will. But it's a very interesting process that I'm still sort of learning about. They basically, FIFA will go to market with a sort of a team base camp brochure that pairs a hotel with a team base camp, and that becomes their home, right? I think FIFA may require them to stay at their team base camp through round of 16.
Okay.
Then they have the option, if they would like to relocate, let's say to get closer to where the final match is going to be hosted. I feel really good about the fact that we are so centrally located that there's not necessarily a need for them to relocate to get closer.
Less than a two-hour flight from everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Now, if someone chooses, and also FIFA refers to Kansas City in our region as the mecca for team base camps because of that, right? It's limited travel for them. They can stay in the bubble. If someone were to choose a team base camp in Seattle and then they progress and the finals end up being in New York, like, they'll probably want to get closer to where they are. But so we work with FIFA, we prep all the materials, which essentially kind of becomes a pitch, right, for these countries. They'll start then having, their delegations come and sort of visit and check out the team base camps in the cities. But the process is sort of odd. The portal opens up and it's kind of first come, first serve. And they rank their base camps. And again, there might be some jockeying and some shuffling. FIFA handles the sort of baseline negotiations on behalf of the countries with the facilities. If a country wants additional enhancements, like let's say they want to, I don't know, they need more privacy, they want to build some privacy screens or something, then anything above and beyond the baseline deliverables, that country will negotiate directly with the facility. So it may be that some of those negotiations happen, and I don't know, a facility's hypothetically not able to deliver or they can't come to agreement, then there might be some jockeying for new positions. We are in an incredible position as it relates to team base camp options here in our market. Really just probably the best options of any host city.
How much is your life going to be different? And I'm sure it has been different, and it'll continue to be different. You're in a different lane.
Yeah. I think that I am 100% going into this project knowing with eyes wide open that this is not a 9-to-5 situation. And I could not be more excited about the opportunity to continue, to lead it. It will be hard. I mean, it's going to be a hard project. There's so many, in a good way and in a challenging way, because so many people are involved. There's certainly, politics and individual business goals and things like that. But I believe that this market in our region will, at the end of the day, all come together with the shared desire to create an incredible experience for people when they come and engage with our city and surrounding areas. There's an end date too, right? So yep. Maybe one day I'll see. I joke, all in, it'll be a 10+ year project that I've been working on. So I'll probably take a long nap afterwards. But I think I'm under no illusion. This will be one of the most challenging jobs of my career, but also probably the most fulfilling. And I couldn't be more proud of our city and to have the opportunity to, I spent time on both coasts, on the big cities, and coming back here and having this opportunity is just, it's a dream.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC staff of Randy Mason, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. The Star produces the best digital sports page in America. It's called Morning Sports Edition, and you can access it by typing in liveedition.kansascity.com. Locally produced content on the Royals, Chiefs, college sports, soccer, and more, plus national coverage of the NBA, NHL, baseball, the NFL, and much more. Can't beat it. Again, it's liveedition.kansascity.com. Thanks for listening. Please join us again soon for another edition of SportsBeat KC.